Hey there, students. A little AP Government review on civil rights and civil liberties. Quick shout out to Mr. Pacone, Sean Touchstone, and Cheska at your respective schools and all of that. So thank you for your support. And so let's go ahead and go into this topic, which is really a topic of semantics, because in everyday speech, we'll talk about civil rights and civil liberties, my rights, my liberties, what's the difference? And really, when I use these terms, I'm going to interchange them. Okay, but the thing is, when we sit down for the AP Government exam, then we have to know the difference between civil rights and civil liberties. They actually will ask questions like this. So when you sit for an exam, you need to know the difference. Now, first of all, civil liberties, we're dealing with individual rights. And I think that what you need to look at here, and it's a little bit confusing because we get into rights and liberties and all that, is look at the Bill of Rights. If you want to see civil liberties, look at the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And what you'll find in the Bill of Rights, you'll find things like your freedom of self-expression, self-defense in the Second Amendment, property rights, your right against unreasonable searches and seizures, your right to privacy, which is really kind of going into the same thing, your due process rights. So all of these are part of your civil liberties. And the interest group you would identify with this would be the American Civil Liberties Union, which of course takes a lot of cases to court dealing with expression, freedom of religion, press, assembly, and the like. So these are civil liberties. Protection from arbitrary government action. So if the government wants to search your home or your car, then has there been due process? Do I have a warrant? Have I been informed of my rights when I'm arrested? Am I being held without being charged? A habeas corpus? All of these things. Now, civil rights, this is dealing with equal protection. And where we're going to find civil rights, now of course we'll find civil liberties there too, but we'll find civil rights in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And civil rights are protections against discrimination. Now, whether that discrimination is based on race, gender, religion, disability, or sexuality, in areas of education, employment, housing, or voting. So it's really preserving equality of opportunity that no matter what my racial background, my gender, or anything like that, that as a citizen of the United States, I have the same right to education, to apply for employment, to apply for housing, and to vote as anyone else does. And so when we think about civil liberties, think about James Madison. Constitutional guarantees. The father of the Constitution, of course, James Madison, introduced the Bill of Rights in Congress. He was a Federalist, but at the same time, he agreed to a Bill of Rights because that's what the Anti-Federalists wanted in order to finally give their support to the Constitution. So if the Constitution says I have rights, I should have them. So my civil liberties are being violated when I'm not able to exercise my constitutional rights that are listed in the Bill of Rights and, of course, in other places in the Constitution as well. Now, for civil rights, we'll think about Dr. Martin Luther King. That is equality under the law. That if other people have these rights, so should I. And it's as good of a time as any to talk about the Incorporation Doctrine, that the Supreme Court has used the 14th Amendment to apply most provisions of the Bill of Rights to the states. Now remember that the Incorporation Doctrine is a doctrine of selective incorporation, so the Supreme Court gets to decide what rights are incorporated and applied to the state governments and which ones are not. But through the Incorporation Doctrine, the Supreme Court takes most of what's in the Bill of Rights and says that the states have to apply these as well. So the 14th Amendment says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So when we see this due process clause, that you will not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, then these are your civil liberties, that the 14th Amendment is reiterating your civil liberties. Now, the Equal Protection Clause is really focused more on civil rights. So every citizen of the United States is entitled to equal protection of the laws, to be treated fairly under the law and get the same opportunities and the same justice that anyone else gets. So when we talk about the Equal Protection Clause, we're talking about civil rights. Now let's close off with a quick little graphic organizer going over what I just said. First of all, civil rights. We're talking about equal protection against discrimination. The laws need to apply the same to everyone, whereas civil liberties are about my constitutional rights and making sure that I'm receiving due process. Brown versus Board and Regents versus Bakke. These are two civil rights cases. Of course, Brown v. Board being a case dealing with segregation in schools, where the court ruled that Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal, that's done. It is not constitutional for schools to segregate on the basis of race. And then there's Regents versus Bakke, which shot down a racial quota system as a criteria for university admissions, as a sole criteria. Okay, remember that the courts have ruled that race and ethnicity can be one of the many factors for admissions, but it cannot be the sole factor, and it cannot be based on a quota system, because that is a violation of someone's civil rights if they don't have the same opportunity to compete for admission into an institution of higher education. Meanwhile, for civil liberties, you're looking at cases like Gideon versus Wainwright and Miranda versus Arizona. In Gideon versus Wainwright, Gideon was not provided with an attorney, and the court ruled that he had the right to an attorney even if that was a state crime. And in Miranda versus Arizona, of course, people, when they are arrested, they have a right to be notified of what their rights are. And as far as interest groups, remember, when you're thinking about civil rights, think about groups like the NAACP that are pushing for civil rights for communities that have been disadvantaged in the past. And then for civil liberties, remember the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, just remember, if you're confused, is this the violation of individual rights, or is it a case of discrimination against a group? And if it's a violation of someone's individual rights, we're dealing with civil liberties. If it's the case of someone being discriminated against because they're part of a certain group, then that would be a civil rights issue. I hope this has been helpful for you. There are plenty more videos for AP government and also US and European and world history on my channel. And also remember to visit TomRichey.net. Follow me on social media at TomRichey on Twitter and Instagram. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. It's always a pleasure.